Welcome to Breakthrough News, as we have our coverage of not only the presidential inauguration of Donald J. Trump, but also covering some of the protests that are happening in over 80 cities here in the United States in resistance to Donald Trump and the billionaire agenda. I'm Sean Blackmon. Eugene Perrier is going to be in the field today, and I'm very happy to be joined by intrepid journalist Rania Khalek. Rania, how you doing?
I am good, Sean. How are you doing? It's good to be with you. What a day of events.
Yeah, that's a fact. That's a fact. And that's one way to put it. I mean, obviously, so much set to happen today, not just the usual pomp and circumstance that comes with every presidential inauguration, but we may even see, according to some reports, the signing of some of these day one executive orders that Trump has been promising, especially around the issues of immigration and things like this. And just, I think, some deep implications will be emanating from a lot of what we see today as Trump takes office for the second time. And, you know, we're getting reports that, you know, people like Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos, you know, making it clear just who the real subject, if you will, of Trump and his administration will be. I think Zuckerberg has some big party, planned for Trump later on today already. Quite a bit of partying going on in D.C. and elsewhere. But I mean, how are you sort of seeing things, Rania, basically, you know, from where we sit in this moment?
Yeah, I mean, and it's our tech overlords are definitely making their power be known, beginning with, you know, shadow president, practically Elon Musk, who, as we know, has been pretty much attending every meeting that Trump has been having, even back when he was picking his cabinet appointments, and definitely having a great deal of influence in the Trump administration, though he's completely unelected, and of course owns one of the most popularly used means of communication on the social media application X, formerly known as Twitter. You have Mark Zuckerberg doing a 180 to try to curry favor with Donald Trump, because obviously these people want to be close to power, and of course there's Jeff Bezos. But I mean, more than that, I just want to point out there's also this kind of, you know, not that it would have been good to have either party in power, but of course, you know, Republicans specifically, you know, Trump in general, Republicans in general are quite a dangerous party, as are Democrats. But there's a lot of darkness coming with a new Trump administration. He has all these executive orders he's promising to sign, and we can get into some of what that means, especially with regard to immigration, but other things as well. But, you know, I also have to say, good riddance to those who are leaving. I mean, Biden oversaw a 15-month-long genocide that I don't even want to say it came to an end quite yet. It's paused right now in Gaza. And people in his administration like Anthony Blinken and Matthew Miller and Jake Sullivan, you know, as far as I'm concerned, these people are various flavors of modern-day Hitlers, given what they've overseen in the last 15 months. I know a lot of people are happy to see them leave office. But definitely unsettling and unclear what we're going to be seeing. But what we can definitely guarantee with this upcoming Trump administration, Sean, is lots of whiplash, because that's what happens with Trump. Lots of whiplash.
That's a fact. I think we're going to go ahead and cut to the swearing in that's happening right now. Absolutely. And we're now, of course, seeing the images from the swearing in here of Donald Trump. And, you know, Rhonda, it really is wild to sort of think about the trajectory of not only Donald Trump, but of politics in the United States over the last few years. I mean, I'm still remembering, maybe you do too, back when Trump was a candidate and no one took him seriously because Trump was this person, this wealthy guy who had been in the American popular consciousness for decades already, had already made some presidential runs with some alternative parties, you know, World Wrestling Entertainment Hall of Famer, reality television show star. But then there came this moment where it was clear that he was a real contender for President of the United States. And wouldn't you know it, he messed around and won. And I think that both the ascent of the victory of Donald Trump and his second presidency now, I think tells us a good bit about politics inside the United States. I also feel like I should mention that today, January 20th, is Martin Luther King Day, a nationally recognized holiday of a person who, like a lot of people, have had their image, reduced to sound bites of this or that speech. But this is someone who was very open in his critique of capitalism and imperialism and state violence, and who literally died trying to organize a movement of poor and working class people known as the Poor People's Campaign, which is the complete opposite of not only what we're seeing from Donald Trump, but the Democrats and the whole of the U.S. political mainstream. So, I mean, for you, Rhonda, I mean, you talked a little bit about what you call our tech overlords and what we have coming in with Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy with this new Doge government department. But what are some other top line issues that you think we should be looking for and what stands to be impacted by a second Trump presidency?
I mean, I think the biggest issue we're going to see, at least just given what he's saying, is domestic issues like immigration. We know that Trump has promised so far to ban birthright citizenship, which he can't actually do. He doesn't have the power to do. That's something that's a constitutional right. It's in the 14th Amendment. But he's saying he wants to try. That's something he's been talking about a lot for years. But I think the more serious, dangerous stuff is the way that he wants to deport people. He wants to increase immigration rates in several cities. He's already promising to in several major cities, working with local law enforcement and federal law enforcement to basically raid and deport people. He's talking about designating Mexican drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, which is basically just laying the foundation for some sort of military intervention in Mexico, which he and members of his administration said they do want to launch. And we saw during the Biden administration, people like Lindsey Graham and others making the argument for actually bombing Mexico, in some cases invading Mexico. And we've done episodes of the Freedom Side Live, as well as my show Dispatches, explaining the real reasons behind that. So I won't go into it here, but that's quite a dangerous issue that we should be looking to. There's also the issue of the tariffs that he wants to, he did that last time around. He's going to do it again. That impacts the U.S. economy. I think with Trump, there's going to be a lot of domestic issues that are kind of going to be front and center. And I think for Democrats, who are basically going to be in the opposition again, the fact that Trump won a second time despite being so incredibly unpopular is a testament to how Democrats are just such a horrible party, whether they're in power or in the opposition. They have very little to show for being in power for the last 4 years. And I mean, unless you call getting Trump to win a second time and completely destroying the left wing of their base and spitting in their face an accomplishment for Democrats. So yeah, I mean, that's just, that's as I see it, Sean, is we're going to have to look on the domestic front when it comes to Trump. I don't know how much he means being uninterested in foreign military interventions. it stands to be seen. We can't take Trump at his word. That said, just given everything he said, it's going to be sort of, very America inside the country focused, I think, during this administration.
For sure. We're going to go ahead and cut to Trump's inaugural address as it's in progress.
President Clinton, President Bush, President Obama, President Biden, Vice President Harris, and my fellow citizens. The golden age of America begins right now. From this day forward, our country will flourish and be respected again all over the world. We will be the envy of every nation, and we will not allow ourselves to be taken advantage of any longer. During every single day of the Trump administration, I will very simply put America first. Our sovereignty will be reclaimed. Our safety will be restored. The scales of justice will be rebalanced. The vicious, violent, and unfair weaponization of the Justice Department and our government will end. And our top priority will be to create a nation that is proud, prosperous, and free. America will soon be greater, stronger, and far more exceptional than ever before. I return to the presidency confident and optimistic that we are at the start of a thrilling new era of national success. A tide of change is sweeping the country, sunlight is pouring over the entire world, and America has the chance to seize this opportunity like never before. But first, we must be honest about the challenges we face. While they are plentiful, they will be annihilated by this great momentum that the world is now witnessing in the United States of America. As we gather today, our government confronts a crisis of trust. For many years, a radical and corrupt establishment has extracted power and wealth from our citizens while the pillars of our society lay broken and seemingly in complete disrepair. We now have a government that cannot manage even a simple crisis at home, while at the same time stumbling into a continuing catalog of catastrophic events abroad. It fails to protect our magnificent, law-abiding American citizens, but provides sanctuary and protection for dangerous criminals, many from prisons and mental institutions that have illegally entered our country from all over the world. We have a government that has given unlimited funding to the defense of foreign borders, but refuses to defend American borders or, more importantly, its own people. Our country can no longer deliver basic services in times of emergency, as recently shown by the wonderful people of North Carolina, been treated so badly. And other states who are still suffering from a hurricane that took place many months ago. Or more recently, Los Angeles, where we're watching fires still tragically burn from weeks ago without even a token of defense. They're raging through the houses and communities, even affecting some of the wealthiest and most powerful individuals in our country, some of whom are sitting here right now. They don't have a home any longer. That's interesting. But we can't let this happen. Everyone is unable to do anything about it. That's going to change. We have a public health system that does not deliver in times of disaster, yet more money is spent on it than any country anywhere in the world. And we have an education system that teaches our children to be ashamed of themselves in many cases, to hate our country despite the love that we try so desperately to provide to them. All of this will change starting today, and it will change very quickly. My recent election is a mandate to completely and totally reverse a horrible betrayal and all of these many betrayals that have taken place, and to give the people back their faith, their wealth, their democracy, and indeed their freedom. From this moment on, America's decline is over. Our liberties and our nation's glorious destiny will no longer be denied, and we will immediately restore the integrity, competency, and loyalty of America's government. Over the past 8 years, I have been tested and challenged more than any president in our 250-year history, and I've learned a lot along the way. The journey to reclaim our republic has not been an easy one, that I can tell you. Those who wish to stop our cause have tried to take my freedom and indeed to take my life. Just a few months ago in a beautiful Pennsylvania field, an assassin's bullet ripped through my ear. But I felt then, and believe even more so now, that my life was saved for a reason. I was saved by God to make America great again. Thank you very much. That is why each day under our administration of American patriots, we will be working to meet every crisis with dignity and power and strength. We will move with purpose and speed to bring back hope, prosperity, safety, and peace for citizens of every race, religion, color, and creed. For American citizens, January 20th, 2025 is Liberation Day.
And that was part of the inaugural address of Donald Trump. And before we get too deep into it, I wanted to start with some good news. Political prisoner Leonard Peltier has actually had his sentence commuted by Joe Biden in one of his last acts as president of the United States. Of course, Leonard Peltier was an organizer and activist with the American Indian movement. And in 1975, he was convicted in the killing of 2 FBI agents, despite all evidence to the contrary. I mean, it's been clear for several decades that Leonard had no role in these deaths, but yet was obviously made an example out of by the state. But I am curious, Rania, about your sort of top-line thoughts on Trump's address here so far, and what do you think it may portend for his administration?
Well, I just want to say I'm very happy to see Leonard Peltier be given clemency. This is somebody who is a political prisoner. Yes, we have political prisoners in the U.S. The man is 80 years old, and he's been in very bad health. And it's a huge injustice that he's spent decades inside a dungeon, basically a U.S. dungeon, for his political activism. As for what we just heard from Donald Trump, I mean, that was quite a dark speech. He opened it, you know, already talking about immigrants and basically comparing them to criminals by saying, you know, while all these disasters are happening, we're allowing all these criminals in. He also, I caught that he made he made sure to frame public health care as something we spend too much money on, and trying to connect that to why it doesn't work well, which is, yes, we do spend the most money on healthcare in the U.S., but not because it's government funded, because there's no cost controls, and it's completely unaffordable. And that just goes to show that Donald Trump is something that he and people like Elon Musk have said is they want to cut spending. So the little that they do spend on public healthcare, I'm sure we're going to try to see them take a knife to it. He talked about education and complained it basically wasn't nationalistic enough. That's how I interpreted that, Sean, when he was talking about how our kids are made to feel ashamed of where they come from, I guess, having to say the Pledge of Allegiance every morning isn't enough to make us proud at school. But yeah, I mean, he also seemed to invoke religion, which was a bit odd. But all that's to say, I mean, that was a pretty dark inaugural address so far. Sean, how did you interpret it?
Yeah, and I think the point about immigrants, excuse me.
Oh, bless you.
Thanks. The point you're making about immigration and the way Trump talks about it is very important. I mean, obviously, Trump is someone who really made his way to the White House, made his way in politics on a wave of virulently racist and xenophobic anti-immigrant tropes and, frankly, lies that have continued right up until this very day. I mean, just the disgusting things he said about Haitian people, these myths about Venezuelan gangs taking over apartment buildings and things like this. And the American Immigration Council recently put out a report that said that Trump's mass deportation plan, which very well could begin today if he, fulfills his promise of doing this on day one, would cost around $315 billion. And they consider that a conservative estimate. And we never hear from Trump or, this far-right wing of American politics about the cost to the American people for these plans. And also, I think it's important to understand that a lot of that money is going to go to detention centers and police agencies and things like this. And we're going to go back to the addresses that continues here on our screen, but also in considering these mass deportation plans, the idea or the logic that Trump and company are using is that, getting rid of all these undocumented people, including the children that are born citizens, and this, of course, goes to the birthright citizenship question, that this is somehow going to improve the lagging United States economy. And this is not the first time that we've seen this in the history of the United States. I mean, this is a country, Rania, that has a long, tried and true tradition of scapegoating a society's problems onto immigrants and sometimes using mass deportation as a supposed remedy to that. I mean, if we go back to the Depression era, actually, we're going to go ahead and go back to Trump's address and we'll continue this conversation in a moment.
Than to defend our country from threats and invasions, and that is exactly what I am going to do. We will do it at a level that nobody's ever seen before. Next, I will direct all members of my cabinet to marshal the vast powers at their disposal to defeat what was record inflation and rapidly bring down costs and prices. The inflation crisis was caused by massive overspending and escalating energy prices, and that is why today I will also declare a national energy emergency. We will drill, baby, drill. America will be a manufacturing nation once again, and we have something that no other manufacturing nation will ever have, the largest amount of oil and gas of any country on earth, and we are going to use it. We're going to use it. We will bring prices down, fill our strategic reserves up again, right to the top, and export American energy all over the world. We will be a rich nation again, and it is that liquid gold under our feet that will help to do it. With my actions today, we will end the Green New Deal and we will revoke the electric vehicle mandate, saving our auto industry and keeping my sacred pledge to our great American auto workers. In other words, you'll be able to buy the car of your choice We will build automobiles
can.
in America again at a rate that nobody could have dreamt possible just a few years ago. And thank you to the auto workers of our nation for your inspiring vote of confidence. We did tremendously with their vote. I will immediately begin the overhaul of our trade system to protect American workers and families. Instead of taxing our citizens to enrich other countries, we will tariff and tax foreign countries to enrich our citizens. For this purpose, we are establishing the External Revenue Service to collect all tariffs, duties, and revenues. It will be massive amounts of money pouring into our treasury, coming from foreign sources. The American dream will soon be back and thriving like never before to restore competence and effectiveness to our federal government. My administration will establish the brand new Department of Government Efficiency. After years and years of illegal and unconstitutional federal efforts to restrict free expression, I will also sign an executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and bring back free speech to America. Never again will the immense power of the state be weaponized to persecute political opponents. Something I know something about. We will not allow that to happen. It will not happen again. Under my leadership, we will restore fair, equal, and impartial justice under the constitutional rule of law. And we are going to bring law and order back to our cities. This week, I will also end the government policy of trying to socially engineer race and gender into every aspect of public and private life. We will forge a society that is colorblind and merit-based. As of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female. This week, I will reinstate any service members who were unjustly expelled from our military for objecting to the COVID vaccine mandate with full back pay. And I will sign an order to stop our warriors from being subjected to radical political theories and social experiments while on duty. It's going to end immediately. Our armed forces will be freed to focus on their sole mission, defeating America's enemies. Like in 2017, we will again build the strongest military the world has ever seen. We will measure our success not only by the battles we win, but also by the wars that we end, and perhaps most importantly, the wars we never get into. My proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker and unifier. That's what I want to be, a peacemaker and a unifier. I'm pleased to say that as of yesterday, one day before I assumed office, the hostages in the Middle East are coming back home to their families. Thank you. America will reclaim its rightful place as the greatest, most powerful, most respected nation on earth, inspiring the awe and admiration of the entire world. A short time from now, we are going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, and we will restore the name of a great president, William McKinley, to Mount McKinley, where it should be and where it belongs.
Well, Rania, the inaugural address started out dark, and I think the darkness continues. I mean, Trump mentioned a number of things there that I think have potentially some pretty serious implications. I mean, I heard things that seems like they would impact the environment, which of course is particularly relevant now, given just the devastation that we've seen in the wildfires in Los Angeles, where the people there have been completely abandoned by Karen Bass. And I mean, we heard the fire chief talking about how basically they weren't able to go after the fire in the way that they could have because so much funding has been cut from them, millions of dollars that could have helped people keep their homes and things like this. I mean, he reiterated this, sort of cowboy colonialism thing that we've been hearing from him recently with this Gulf of America. And of course, along with that, wanting to take back over the Panama Canal. He talked about how it'll be, official government policy that there will only be two genders. He talked about America becoming a colorblind society, quote unquote, and merit-based, which I think these are classic racist dog whistles when we talk about merit-based here in the United States. Of course, understanding that issues of race and class, really put an asterisk on this question of merit. I mean, does someone deserve something more when they've had, sort of every systemic and societal advantage in that way, and those that don't are just sort of cast aside? I mean, it's obvious that this is just paving a way for, a racist, very sexist, homophobic, transphobic dispensation, which I think is what a lot of us expected here under Trump. But how was this segment of the address striking you, Rania?
Well, you're right. It started out dark, and by the end of that, what we just saw got pitch black.
Yeah.
But, Sean, I think that Trump is really the embodiment of just the most extreme, in many ways, version of America.
That's right.
And he, we're in a moment of weakening economy that's been weakening for a couple decades now. And all the ruling class in America has left is to really just divide and conquer with culture wars. And that's why he's throwing this red meat to people, because we have this massively funded right-wing media apparatus that makes the issue about not the class divide and growing inequality and the fact that we pay pretty high taxes in the U.S., but we don't get anything for it because it all goes to wars. Not about any of that, but he's talking about things like, there's only two genders and that's going to be his main issue. Or he's talking about the COVID vaccine mandate, and that became a bit of a culture war issue. And we're going to bring veterans back in who were kicked out for not taking it. Or, saying we're not going to let them learn radical political theories, or talking about getting rid of diversity and equality and inclusion policies. Like, these are the reasons that we have issues in the U.S., and not the fact that you have a world where wealth is, in the hands of fewer and fewer people. And on top of that, I mean, it feels like he just took me back in time to like 15, 20 years ago, talking about drill, baby, drill. We just had these horrific, unprecedented wildfires in L.A. And obviously, this is a result, and other extreme weather issues and wildfires and things that we're seeing happen with more frequency are a result of climate change that fossil fuels have created. And to just sit there and be like, oh, we're going to drill, baby, drill, and do more oil than ever. And I didn't even know at one point he literally said that you're going to be able to buy whatever car you want now, as if, were we prevented from buying whatever car? I didn't even know that was a freedom we didn't have in America. Just making things up. And then I'll also note, I laughed. At one point I did giggle. It was because he said he's going to start an external revenue service. And that was funny, because talking about, that just means he wants to cut taxes, probably cut the IRS more, but that just means cutting taxes on rich people. And talk about, these tariffs, and we're going to help working people when we're not. But I don't know. I think, these are just little details, but I think the most important thing here is the fact that he really was talking about, on the one hand, wanting to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. And you mentioned the Panama Canal issue before. Apparently, he's talking about taking back the Panama Canal now, and Monroe Doctrine 2.0. That was just after he claimed that he was going to be the anti-war president, that we're not going to start any new wars and we're going to end all the wars. And then he invoked the ceasefire in Gaza. So it's a complete and utter contradiction that just makes no sense. And that's the whiplash of Trump, Sean.
Yeah, and I think whiplash is a good way to describe it, because on this issue of, what he's calling the Gulf of America, and this whole issue with the Panama Canal, this is nothing but, a reiteration of the Monroe Doctrine, a long-standing policy and ideology that's really been a driving force of U.S. imperialism for quite a long time. This idea of Latin America and the Caribbean as the quote-unquote backyard of the United States. And I seem to remember Joe Biden saying, well, it's not the backyard, it's the front yard. So in other words, we still own it, but, I guess we just look upon it more kindly than if it were in the back, or whatever it was that he meant. But to be certain, I think what you're saying definitely hits the nail on the head. And on the economic question, which I think you touched on, with Trump talking about trade and tariffs. And if you notice, he goes out of his way to make these seem like things that are going to fill the pockets of the American people, and that it's going to signal this great positive economic turnaround. And this is obviously a ploy to get buy-in from the masses of the people in the United States into this. But it actually just doesn't seem like that will be the case. And so this America First policy and ideology of Trump and co. has been framed as something that's going to help inaugurate a new era of prosperity for the people of the United States. This is what I think you were getting at, Ron, when you talked about his promises of being able to, buy the car that you want and all these things. You'll get all these goodies if you just buy into this policy. But in truth, just like with so much else, really, the totality of Trump's program and platform is not about helping, the everyday working man, in the Midwest who goes to the factory with the lunch pail or whatever, this sort of strange, kind of warped image of the American worker that Trump and co. like to push. But it's about continuing to fill the pockets of the people whose pockets are already full. Talking about the wealthy elite, the ruling class, the capitalists that is represented by the Donald Trumps of the world, the Jeff Bezoses of the world, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, including these people who not so very long ago called themselves being opponents of Trump and fighting back against Trump's agenda, who now are, standing before Trump with hat in hand, really lying prostrate before him, willing to accept anything and everything that he suggests. And I think it shows the weakness of these kinds of ruling class figures, and it shows how they are not going to be the real force to push back or fight back against what Trump is going to do today, tomorrow, and throughout these next 4 years. But I think that's why it's so important, Rania, that we have a real fight back in the streets of the United States, which is happening in over 80 cities here across the country, as people from the East Coast to the West, the Midwest to the South, all over, people are organizing to push back against this agenda, which we know the Democrats will not do, which we know the capitalists who claim to be anti-Trump will not do. I think, as ever, it's going to be the masses of people that make all the difference in this juncture of history, Rania.
Absolutely. I mean, we can't get complacent here. Yes, Biden is out of office and his team of genocide heirs. But now we have Trump in office, and this is just one of two parties that run the country, both a part of the ruling class, both support many of the same policies. There's some slight divergences, but the issues that existed yesterday still exist today, and they're going to continue to intensify. Trump talked about something about free speech and wanting to get rid of the persecution of political opponents. He didn't detail what he meant by that. I mean, I don't think he meant the Julian Assange type persecution of political opponents, or the fact that the previous administration sent stormtroopers into university campuses to shut down protests against the genocide in Gaza, or the many various ways that the BDS movement, boycott, divestment, and sanction against Israel, has been outlawed in a number of states, which is a huge violation of the First Amendment and free speech. But he's not against any of that at all. Not as far as I've seen. If he wants to be, he's more than welcome to be. But if anything, his administration is full of people who have talked about going after their political opponents for false connections to America's quote-unquote adversaries, in the case of going after pro-Palestine solidarity groups, claiming that they're being funded by the Chinese Communist Party. You have people in this administration like Marco Rubio, who is now the Secretary of State, who is calling for taking away the nonprofit status and having the Department of Treasury investigate Code Pink because they protested his disgusting policies against Venezuela and Cuba and his disgusting support for the genocide in Gaza. Those are the kinds of people Trump has put in power. So let's see him try to protect free speech against somebody like Marco Rubio, who is in his administration. I mean, it stands to be seen. I just don't trust Trump's rhetoric. I mean, he's quite fraudulent when he claims to be anti-war, has proven to be in the past, but claiming he's going to make peace now. And again, while calling for taking back the Panama Canal. And this just speaks to the sort of clownish, imperialist behavior you're going to see from these sorts of rulers that our, friend of the show, Vijay Prashad, calls mediocre, decadent, and dangerous. Trump is as mediocre as it gets. Yeah. But he's decadent and dangerous, and he's now inherited, once again, U.S. empire. And it is quite frightening when you have people talking about invading and bombing Mexico, when you have people talking about taking back things that don't belong to them and never actually did because it's not their land. America, at the end of the day, is an expansionist empire that runs on parasiting off of the third world. And Trump gets that. His friends, his billionaire friends who are behind him in his administration get that. And I just think we need to keep our eyes clear on what's going on and make sure we respond to it by not getting complacent just because there's been a change in administration or just because there's been a ceasefire in Gaza.
Absolutely. I mean, the hypocrisy here on the question of free speech, like a lot of things we could name, is really glaring, Rania, because to your point, free speech in the United States has been under attack. Well, not just this year, but certainly this past year plus of people being in the streets, not just in the U.S., but around the world, in solidarity for Palestine. And the response to it from this government, from both parties, mind you, because, we were just under a Democratic administration. But in over this last year, Rania, people have been doxxed. People have been attacked by police, by pro-Zionist vigilantes. People have been fired from their jobs. People have been kicked out of school. There have even been people who have been threatened with deportation, not because they committed any real crime, but because they had the audacity to say that Israel is committing a genocide in Palestine, and that the only reason Israel is able to commit that genocide is it because it has the direct and exuberant support of the most brutal, the most wealthy, and the most expansive empire the world has ever known, and that's the United States of America. I mean, I mentioned Martin Luther King earlier in the broadcast, and it was King himself who said that the U.S. is the greatest purveyor of violence on the world stage. And it's as true today as it was when King said it then. And I think it's also worth mentioning, just since we're talking about King, that he was killed in April of 1968, a year to the day that he came out against the war in Vietnam. And this is when his popularity rates plummeted, friends and so-called allies fled from him. People were upset with King because he didn't stay, quote unquote, his wheelhouse. And King himself raised this hypocrisy. He said, people praise me when I tell black people to be nonviolent against racist sheriffs in the South, but these same journalists, so-called, and these same so-called friends and allies, they condemn me when I tell the United States to be nonviolent against the people of Vietnam who were simply fighting for their liberation. So these same contradictions certainly remain. And you also bring up the recently passed a so-called nonprofit killer bill, which basically gives the government unilateral power to strip the nonprofit status of any group that is deemed to be, supporting terrorists, to use their language. And this can be stripped away without any evidence or due process and things like this. And so we were just speaking of King. I think we're going to go ahead and go to a clip of Martin Luther King that we have right here.
Realize that the problems of racial injustice and economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power. We read one day, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But if a man doesn't have a job or an income, he has neither life nor liberty and the possibility for the pursuit of happiness. He merely exists. Estimated that we spend $322,000 for each enemy we kill in Vietnam, while we spend in the so-called war on poverty in America only about $53 for each person classified as poor. The promises of the Great Society have been shot down on the battlefield of Vietnam, making the poor, white and Negro, bear the heaviest burdens both at the front and at home.
And of course, again, that was Martin Luther King as we mark Martin Luther King Day. And, speaking of those protests, once again, Rania, I think it's important that we don't let today become Trump Day. Yes, it's Trump's inauguration. Yes, he is bringing in this aggressive, hard right, reactionary program. But we have to fight to make what they're trying to make Trump Day back into King Day, and not let that legacy of struggle and fight back be able to be stripped away. And, not long before King died, he was in a meeting where he was talking about how there has to be a radical redistribution of political and economic power. Towards the end of his life, Martin Luther King's politics were radicalizing. He talked about a revolution of values. I spoke before about him coming out publicly and explicitly against U.S. imperialism. This is also someone who openly critiqued capitalism. This is the king we never hear. You know, the United States would have you think that Martin Luther King only ever made one speech, and that's the I Have a Dream speech. But all of his critique of America's social, political, and economic order, the fact that he talked about the triple evils of racism, economic exploitation, and war, and their interconnectedness, and how that very dynamic continues to this very day, this is something that is glossed over for obvious reasons, for the same reason that the far right, led by Trump in the United States, wants to remove education and materials about race and gender and so many other things from the different curricula in this country. Excuse me, there wants to be there's an attempt for there to be a literal whitewashing of the history of the United States, of the struggle of black people, the struggle of women, the struggle of the LGBTQ community, the struggle of poor, working, and oppressed people that have, done so much for so many here in this country, and that have always been under threat, but are now under direct attack by Trump and the right, which is a part of a long-running campaign from the right to try to undo the progress of the civil rights movement, of the Black Power movement, of the women's liberation movement, of the immigration movement, of the LGBTQ liberation movement. I think we should see this, Rania, as really an all-out offensive, an attack against the progress that oppressed people have made in this country over the course of its history. And although it's being painted in this way, that it's going to be this new era of prosperity, and every day will be Sunday, a chicken in every pot, and a Donald Trump figurine in every living room, or whatever it is that they're promising. But like you say, I think this is just an attempt to put a gloss on something that's actually quite dark. And as such, the kind of organized fight back that begins today and that was going on before today will definitely have to continue. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And I just want to note to those who are watching right now that in about 9 minutes at the top of the hour, we will be beginning to stream an action in New York. There's protests taking place in 80 cities across the country to fight back. And the New York action, you can watch it live. I believe our very own Kay Pritzker will be there, so you can get a glimpse of Kay as well. Sorry if I think Kay will be there. I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, Sean. So stick around for that after me and Sean are done discussing the inauguration. But just to add to what you were saying, I mean, about MLK Jr. on this day, not only was his analysis of the problems with America on point, and that's the reason that, when he was alive, especially near the end of his life, he was completely ostracized and despised by the corporate media that today will pretend to celebrate him for his I Have a Dream speech, especially when he came out against the war in Vietnam. But he also had the right prescription, right, about where our money should be going. And, we live in this imperialist country. It's the biggest empire in history. America's a very rich country, but you wouldn't know that sometimes by walking in the streets of New York or DC or LA, where we have a horrific homeless problem. And it's not just adults. There are homeless children in America, where we incarcerate people more than anywhere else in the world as a way to deal with surplus population of poor people, with a disproportionate number of black people in prison who are pretty much there for being poor. And on top of that, I mean, we have this system of, hating immigrants, as we see with Donald Trump right now, and treating them all or framing them all as criminals who need to be deported, while also refusing to even deal with the underlying reason we have people coming to the U.S. in the first place. They're either escaping violence or escaping economic, well, you could call it economic violence, but it's coming for better economic opportunities. A lot of the times, they're coming from countries that are either violent or have economic collapses because of U.S. imperialist policies. part of the immigration debate that never gets mentioned by either party, because both of them benefit from imperialist policies and sanctions policies that try to overthrow governments in places like Cuba or Venezuela, or try to control the resources in places like Honduras or El Salvador or Guatemala, where, you know, the source of a lot of immigrants over the last couple of decades. Not to mention, you know, the trade policies across the region in places like Mexico. I mean, Trump said he's going to address trade policies. I don't really know what that actually means, because he's never really given a formula for what he means by that. But, you know, and then you also mentioned this trying to undo the successes of past movements, Sean. And, you know, it's very counter-revolutionary. It's also very archaic, and it kind of comes with social conservatives like the Republican Party, who really want to take us back to an era where you had the white rich man in charge and everybody else was a second class or third class or fourth class citizen, depending on where on that hierarchy you fall. They literally want to take us back to a time where women don't have rights, where people of color don't have rights, and where, you know, where, and it works on a U.S. population that is, you know, especially like where you play to these like racial fears. But, you know, I think the crazy thing about Trump, and we'll, you know, keep coming back to Breakthrough News to understand more about this, is that that sort of right-wing mentality isn't just dominant among just white people anymore. You kind of have it becoming increasingly dominant among men. And there's something to be said about what's happening in our like very alienated sort of end times capitalism society, when these kinds of ideas by these shock jocks are becoming increasingly prevalent across sometimes racial lines. I mean, I don't want to overplay how much that matters, but it also does matter. The last thing I'll say here before I throw it back to you, Sean, is I want to remind people who are watching to please make sure you like, subscribe, and share. Make sure you smash that like button. It helps boost some of the algorithm. And I also want to remind you that exactly. And I also want to remind you that here at Breakthrough News, we are an independent media outlet. We are able to give you this sort of content and the many shows that we produce and all the journalism that we do. We're able to travel to places like LA, bring you reports from the ground in the Middle East, cover elections, cover the movements that are taking place, not just in the US, but around the world, because of our viewers, because of people like you who are watching, who are able to throw in as little as $5 a month on Patreon to become members of Breakthrough News. So I just want to say, become a member of Breakthrough News if you can, patreon.com/Breakthrough News. And for as little as $5 a month, you can help be a part of independent media. We've learned anything over the past 15 months, if we didn't know already. Corporate media lies for empire. We don't lie here at Breakthrough News. We show you the truth. So I'll throw it back to you, Sean.
Absolutely. And I think it's true that you really can't find coverage like this anywhere else, certainly not in the mainstream media. The same mainstream media that in this moment is either pushing triumphalism over Trump's victory, or they're pushing defeat and doom. And, you know, this whole, well, what can we possibly do to defeat Trump? And actually, I remember, you know, in the immediate aftermath of the election, Rania, and I'm sure you saw this as well, what we saw from liberals, what we saw from Democrats was this narrative that somehow the reason why Kamala Harris lost was because, you know, they went too far left, or they were too sympathetic or too open to the demands of the left. Never mind the fact that people who were disrupting different campaign speeches talking about Palestine, I mean, Kamala Harris shouted down Arab women, told them, "I'm speaking," when they talked about the need for an arms embargo and a ceasefire and things like this. And so this is all sort of part and parcel. And in about 3 minutes, we are going to be going to the program at the inauguration protest here in New York. And you're right, Rania, that later on we will hear from Breakthrough's Kate Pritzker, who's on the ground in Los Angeles with the inauguration protest there.
Sorry, I got that part wrong. I apologize to Kate.
No worries, no worries.
I thought he was in New York. My apologies.
Yeah, no worries. And I actually think New York may be a little delayed here as well. So certainly we'll keep an eye on that. But I want to really hone in on something that you said, Rania, which is very important. When we talk about these different issues that Trump is raising as key points in his incoming administration. Issues dealing with race, gender, sexuality, immigration, things like this. And I think it's important that we don't see these issues as separate. What connects them all, the tie that binds them, is the fact that they are all rooted in Trump's plan and program to do just what you said, to further ensconce the power of these white, racist, wealthy elements who are the people that really control society, what some call the elites, what some call the billionaire class, what some call capitalists. This is the element that is set to have their power, their influence, and to them, I think most importantly, their wealth sort of further edified and the power of it further deepened under a Donald Trump agenda, which is why for them it's important to kind of give it this thin veneer of, well, we're actually all going to benefit from it. You know what I mean? And you're right that this kind of reactionary thinking is, it's not, the exclusive property of white people or just white men or anything like this. I do think that we're seeing it spread to other communities. And I've even noted that I would argue, there's been an uptick in these kind of reactionary nativist politics among some black people in this country who have also been influenced by these anti-immigrant narratives. And I mean, when we talk about this issue of mass immigration, for instance, I mean, I was starting to mention this a little bit earlier, and this issue over whether or not it even works. I mean, if we go back to the Depression era, we saw Mexican immigrants specifically were singled out. They were accused of stealing jobs and taking advantage of public assistance, which, I mean, I think is contradictory, but nevertheless, this was the narrative. And in that period, anywhere between 350,000 to 2 million Mexicans were deported from the United States. And it's estimated that up to 60% of the people that were deported were actually U.S. citizens. And this is the kind of action that Trump is interested in. But, and this is important, that mass deportation did not do anything to improve the economy of the United States. And that's just one example of a mass deportation in this country's history. There is no evidence in history that shows that mass deportations actually have a positive impact on the economy or that American workers materially benefit from it. So that's why it's so important that there's this aggressive narrative and propaganda and scapegoating of immigrants so that the ruling class can point and say, look, we're not the problem. The people who actually are exploiting you, the people who are actually taking money out of your pockets, the people who are actually making it more difficult for you to feed and clothe and house and educate your family. No, it's not us. Don't look over here. We're going to put up these smoke and mirrors and we're going to point the finger at these people who come to this country, Rania, to your point, more often than not because of the machinations of U.S. imperialism, because of the conditions of famine, of lack of medicine, a lack of infrastructure that is often the result of U.S. wars and of U.S. sanctions. These are the people that are being blamed for the conditions in the United States, economic and otherwise. But see, this is nothing but a classic example of divide and conquer that we've seen throughout this country's history, Rania, and it only has one real goal. The goal is to make sure that different groups and elements of poor, oppressed, and exploited people are fighting with each other instead of fighting the ruling class, who are actually the authors of their suffering. And above all else, it keeps our attention off of the capitalist system that I would argue is at the root of all of this exploitation. So that is why it is so important for Trump and the far right to stoke this racist, xenophobic, anti-immigrant narrative. And I think we should mention that the Democrats, bizarrely, have now jumped on this bandwagon. Although I think actually this is a more honest representation, perhaps, of the Democrats' politics. Because let's remember, none other than Barack Obama, who is still very positive, someone who is very popular amongst the American people. This is someone who came into the White House on promises of hope and change that we can believe in. We were made to believe that Barack Obama was going to be the complete opposite, the antidote for 8 years of a racist, right-wing George Bush administration. But what did we see? We saw a record number of deportations, to the point where our friends in the immigration movement called him the deporter-in-chief. And you mentioned Honduras earlier. Well, it was under Obama that democratically elected leader Manuel Zelaya suffered a coup d'etat. He was forced out of power. And also in 2011, I believe, we saw the NATO invasion of Libya, which took Libya from the most prosperous country on the African continent to a failed state with open air slave markets. This is the first black president that literally returns slavery to this country in Africa. Muammar Gaddafi lynched in the street. And so when we talk about this Democrat Party stance on immigration, we can fast forward all the way to Kamala Harris, who on the campaign trail said, Donald Trump says that he's going to strengthen the border, but he doesn't walk the walk. And, you know, she made this corny pop culture reference, or as my friend Quavo says, speaking of Quavo of the Migos, he doesn't walk it like he talks it. So not only did she fail at being, you know, the hip genocide auntie that she was trying to portray herself to be, she literally was critiquing Donald Trump's immigration policy from the right. And this, I think, shows the kind of dark place that American politics is in. And I think now we're going to go to a clip about that shows some of these tech CEOs, these tech overlords that you were talking about, Rania, being introduced at the inauguration.
And you can still see from a wider shot those tech CEOs. One of the things that I also want to mention is that they're not alone. You could see on the left there, that was Lauren Sanchez. Oh, there's Tim Cook. It's not just them. They have their spouses and their significant others. And these are some prime seats.
I was going to say, in an environment in which every single seat is accounted for, it really is something that they are in the room for this. I mean, not a lot of people can get seats to this. You've got 535 members of Congress who are guaranteed seats. Everybody else has to earn one. And these people, men, all of them, were able to get seats because of their cultivation of a relationship with Donald Trump, for the most part, which all happened after the election.
I don't even think the cabinet nominees have plus ones in there.
Well, Sean, I real quick before we comment on that incredible clip from CNN. That was CNN, in case anybody's wondering. I just wanted to give a shout out to our listeners from WPFW Pacifica in Washington, D.C., who are listening to us here on Breakthrough News, coming to you live during the inauguration. Soon we're going to be bringing you coverage from the protests happening in New York City. There are protests in 80 cities across the country. And we're going to be bringing you live coverage from New York City protest to fight back, as Donald Trump has just been inaugurated president. But just speaking to that that CNN clip we just heard or saw about those tech CEOs having front row seats to the inauguration, I thought the commentary was interesting. I mean, it's very important to note that they were there, of course, and we can talk about what that means with relation to Donald Trump and them having very clear, close access to him. But the CNN commentators sitting there acting condescending about it was a bit interesting to me, because the reason they're acting condescending isn't because they have an issue with the fact that there are CEOs, these billionaires who basically run our, all these social media outlets that are our prime methods of communication and digesting and getting out news. Not necessarily that, but because this is like an issue of partisanship. It's fine when Mark Zuckerberg, for example, is working with, Democrats or the ADL or CNN, for that matter, to fact check things, to make sure that the corporate media has control, or corporate or like a ruling class, a certain segment of the ruling class has control over what's considered legitimate news and what's not. But when that's in the hand of someone like Donald Trump, who's been very antagonistic to media outlets like CNN, like MSNBC, like the New York Times, where now we have Mark Zuckerberg sitting there saying, no more fact checking, we're done with that, free speech, to try to curry favor with Donald Trump. I mean, that's actually what they're upset about. I also thought it was interesting. You heard one of the analysts say on CNN, or saying in like an upsetting manner that, oh, they're all men. I mean, yeah, that's right. They're all men, and that, sure, it's upsetting. But my bigger issue with the control and the power that these billionaire tech CEOs have isn't the fact that not one of them's a woman, because that's not actual equality to me. It's the fact that you have a bunch of billionaires who run for-profit social media companies controlling our means of communication. But yeah, I'm curious your thoughts on that, Sean.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's that good old, girl boss feminism. You know what I mean? We need more. We need more women tech billionaires kowtowing to Trump, because that's process. Yeah, that's progress. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, we need more women at the helm of this blood-soaked and destructive system. I mean, yeah, it's pretty silly. And the fact that we've seen Zuckerberg and so many others in that ilk, I mean, we're literally seeing Elon Musk being integrated into the American government. You know what I mean? In this very way. So they literally have a representative of their political and economic interest right there in the White House. And the masses of poor working and oppressed people in this country cannot say the same. And it's 100% clear, Rania, that the reason why people like Zuckerberg, who were talking so big and bad about Trump once upon a time, are now, sort of bowing and scraping to him, is because at the end of the day, they want to protect their bottom line. These are wealthy people, they are billionaires, and they fully intend to stay that way. And if that means playing a footsie with Donald Trump, well, they are more than happy to do that for as long as they need to. All that pretense about fighting back or whatever, I mean, that just flies right out the window, because we're talking about money, we're talking about profit, and we're talking about the only thing that these companies really care about. And I think it's really important that we note that these companies like Meta or Google, just because they're free to use and things like that, we should never mistake that for thinking that they're for us in that same way. They can absolutely function in service to the state. And it seems like that's perhaps what we're preparing for with this second Trump presidency.
Right. I mean, I think that at the end of the day, we have a country run by billionaires. I'm going to sound like Bernie Sanders, but we do. We have a country that's run by a handful of people. I think it's something like there's 8 people in the U.S. who have more average wealth than the bottom half of the country. That might be the world. It might be more like 3 or 4 people in the U.S. Regardless, that's a disgusting statistic. We don't live in a democracy. It's a huge illusion. We live in what's considered an oligarchy, at least according to one Princeton study. The average American actually has no real say over policy in this country. Almost every politician is bought and paid for by someone. That's what happens under capitalism. And that's why I think the most important theme we have of this episode is that regardless of whether Democrats or Republicans are in charge, we still have the same rot at the foundation of all of the problems in America that actually impact the entire world. The entire world knows that Trump is becoming president today because the American president is actually more like a world dictator. So Trump is the new dictator of the world because American empire runs the world. And so, I just want to again encourage everybody to keep coming back to Breakthrough News to get your news and analysis on everything that's about to happen, because we're an independent media outlet that's not funded by the tech CEO sitting next to Donald Trump. And on that note, Sean, I'm going to throw it back to you because I think we're getting ready for the protest.
Right. Well, no need to call me on my name, Rania. No, I'm just joking. But yeah, and I believe
The
right
real
now.
Donald Trump, everyone, exposed
Yeah.
on Breakthrough News is Sean Blackmon.
Yeah, you heard it here first. But I believe right now what's happening is the sort of former farewell to the former president and former vice president, of course, Joseph Robinette Biden and Kamala Harris. And like you say, and like we've been mentioning throughout the show, I mean, protests are happening in over 80 cities across the country. I mean, in D.C., in L.A., we see them in Indiana, North Carolina, New Hampshire, all over the place. And I heard you use a word that I think is going to be very important, Rania, to understand not only the Trump administration, but to understand the real goal of capitalist politics in the United States. And it's summed up in that word you used, oligarchy. And what is an oligarchy? It's a rule of government by the wealthy. And what we've heard from Donald Trump in his inaugural address, certainly what we saw in his first presidency, was precisely that. But that is not particular to Trump. It's not particular to the Republicans, nor is it particular or unique to this era. I think of John Jay, who was the first main Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Now, John Jay was related to some of the wealthiest and most prominent families in the United States, either by birth or marriage. And he is credited with a quote as saying that those who own the country should run it. And he was appointed by George Washington, just to give folks an idea of the period that was in. And so the entire goal, the entire trajectory of politics in the United States was not to establish a democracy. It was not to actually have a government for the people and by the people. The sort of the seeds, if you will, of the ruling class, that element in the United States, they understood that if real democracy were to take root in this country, then their rule would be overthrown. So everything, the whole of this political system was designed so that political power rested firmly in the hands of the wealthy. And we're actually going to go ahead and go to the program here in New York, which is starting right now.
That's our first message to Trump and the billionaires who think they can rule our lives. But first, we want to celebrate that our brother, our comrade, our dear freedom fighter, Leonard Peltier, is coming home. After 49 years, 11 months and many days, our brother has finally received clemency. We also want to celebrate that in this moment, our Palestinian political prisoners are also returning home. Right now, in over 80 cities across the United States, people are organizing, people are marching against Trump and the billionaires. In Asheville, North Carolina, in Kansas City, Missouri, in Jackson, Mississippi, in Boise, Idaho, everywhere in this country, people are coming together to say no to Trump. We are here because we are inspired by the legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. He understood very clearly, decades ago, that the evils of racism, of economic exploitation, and militarism could not be separated one from the other, that it was all tied together, and therefore we had to fight it all together. Our brother Martin was assassinated by the US government, because he understood clearly more than ever that we have to fight to change this system. This is a system that gives everything to the billionaires and nothing to the people of this country. That is why no matter who is in office, we are going to fight against war, against poverty, against racism, against deportations, against homophobia, against gender violence. We organized and we fought against Genocide Joe because he paid for hundreds of thousands of our brothers and sisters across the Arab and Middle East to be killed in Palestine, in Yemen, in Syria, in Iraq. And now we fight against Donald Trump because we know what his real agenda is. He wants to destroy workers' rights. He wants to deport millions of our immigrant families. He wants to give our hard-earned money to the billionaires and his friends like Elon Musk. He wants to finish the destruction of our environment. He wants to privatize increasing sectors of our government. And we are clear that Trump is 100% behind Netanyahu and the genocide of the Palestinian people. But we know very clearly that we are not going to defeat Trump by following the Democrats. The Democrats are who led us here in the first place. We know we have to build a movement, a united force of all the people in the bottom who want to fight for the right to live. That's why I want to open up this rally with the words of our brother Martin, who said, "Let us rededicate ourselves to this long and bitter but beautiful struggle for the world that we want." Because we want a world without Trumps and without Bidens. We want a world where the working people decide what our future is going to be. We want a world without occupations, without deportations, without war. And now I'm honored to welcome to the stage a dear friend, a dear sister, Isabella from the Palestinian Youth Movement.
Say it loud and say it clear. Liberation is near. Say it clear and say it loud. Gaza, you make us proud. After 15 months of unimaginable horror in Gaza, Palestinians have emerged victorious. And despite what Trump, Biden, or anyone else in what anyone else says, the United States and Israel have failed in Gaza. Achieving none of their objectives, the Israeli army is broken. Netanyahu's cabinet is falling apart. The Zionist morale is shattered. And even the Israeli press is now reporting the reality that Israel could not win. Israel could not win, and the Palestinian people, like the people of the world, we will write our own history. Despite immense American support, the Israeli army could not divide and colonize the Gaza Strip. Gaza's resistance not only survived but thrived. Prisoners are finally returning to their loved ones. Displaced Palestinians are returning to their destroyed homes and promising to rebuild. Look no further than the joyful scenes coming from Gaza and Ramallah to understand that the ceasefire agreement is a victory for all of Palestine and for all people of conscience across the world. May the scenes of hope fuel our struggle and re-energize us to continue the fight for full liberation. The path to liberation is long, and it is our duty to Palestine to confront the brutality of Zionism and U.S. imperialism with ever more vigor. We will never forget that this is an American and bipartisan genocide. The U.S. provided tens of billions of funding for this war on Palestinian life. U.S. media outlets manufactured consent for the genocide by promoting known lies. American universities and police continue to suppress protests to quell dissent. The U.S. not only fueled the genocide, but they went after all those who stood up against it. As Palestinians, we are clear-headed that it is American imperialism, represented by both parties and the ruling class, that continues the Zionist occupation of Palestine. The genocidal Biden administration was not our friend, and neither is this incoming administration. The ceasefire deal and the historic prisoner release it includes was not given to us by Trump. It is not his nor his administration's gift to the Palestinian people, but it was the Palestinian people's steadfastness and unyielding resolve that remained victorious. In the past 15 months, our fight has become more international than ever. We know that people around the world are ready to raise and carry our banner of our cause. As they do, they fight the billionaire agenda and the global ruling class wherever they are. It is our duty to halt Zionism's genocidal agenda. The U.S. continues to send billions to Israel while American houses burn, where people here lose their homes and their jobs and their rights. Moreover, logistics companies like Maersk operate outside of our backyard here in New York and New Jersey, and they provide an unending flow of military components without which the U.S. genocide would have been impossible. So the site of struggle is right here. And we join with all people in struggle against the billionaire agenda that profits from genocide and destruction. Our fight is just beginning. The task ahead is the full liberation of Palestine. Gaza has shown the world that the impossible can be achieved, and it is up to us to carry that spirit forward, no matter who is representing U.S. imperialist interests. Number one terrorist! U.S. imperialists! Brick by brick, wall by wall, imperialism will fall. Brick by brick, wall by wall, Zionism will fall.
Our next speaker
is a longtime activist, an actress, and constant participant in the Palestine movement. Please help me welcome Susan Sarandon.
Thank you. Thanks, you warmed me right up. Thank you. Okay, wow. You guys are brave to be out here in this cold. Thanks for coming. I want to begin by celebrating the very fragile ceasefire that we're having right now and pray that it sticks and that occupation ends. I want to recognize and thank all the organizers, the demonstrators, the activists all over the world and among us today who worked tirelessly despite intimidation. And they did so with love and not hate. I want to recognize the brave, heroic doctors, nurses, journalists who gave their lives as they did their jobs and showed us what it means to stand for truth and humanity. They changed the narrative. There has been a shift in global consciousness, and that takes work and perseverance. And this hard work is just beginning. We must continue to use our voices, our bodies, our organizing tools to not only stand for the liberation of Palestine, but for all people suffering under colonial imperialism. We're here today to celebrate and encourage the fight against this oligarchy, which is not just in this administration, but everywhere. And to pledge to fight for the rights of workers, women, the LGBTQ community, and immigrants and their families. Today, we have a wide coalition here. Palestinian movement activists, unions, which are at the top of my list to give me faith and hope in the future. And the other rising power, which I've seen in first person on universities, the rise of student power is the future of hope in this country. We must urgently work to change this country's priorities. We should not be spending $1 trillion a year for war when the planet is already burning. People from North Carolina to LA to Lahaina need immediate support. Climate catastrophe cannot be minimized or denied. This is the real threat to our security. We must start a dialogue that is fact-based and which also includes listening. There is a shift happening. We all can feel it, right? You know something's happening. There are cracks in this system, and that can let the light in. We're connected worldwide by our dreams and our struggles. No one is free until everyone is free. Today, on Martin Luther King's birthday, I'd like to also find a quote for you all. He said, "Somewhere we must come to see that human progress never rolls in on the wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts and persistent work of dedicated individuals. We can do this. A better world is possible." Stay warm, you all. Thank you.
Brick by brick, wall by wall, imperialism will fall.
My name is Mian, and I'm with Nodoto for Korean Community Development. Do Kum-yeon, a Korean elder, infamously said, "I hate all American presidents. They keep interfering with Korea." 2 summers ago, I saw Do Kum-yeon sit in the front row of a human blockade blocking the delivery of THAAD missile batteries in her village of Soseongri. The U.S. and South Korea claim that the THAAD missile system is necessary to protect South Koreans from North Korean threats. In reality, the THAAD missile system only protects U.S. soldiers and bases across Asia as the U.S. prepares for its war on China. Soseongri is a farming village of 100 people. The average age is over 70 years old. For 10 years, Do Kum-yeon and other village elders sit on that road every week, rain or shine, to defend their farmland and their sacred religious sites from THAAD's toxic waste and destruction. THAAD's radiation is giving the citizens cancer. Its unchecked toxic waste is killing their crops. And in response, the South Korean government sicks their riot cops to beat the village elders with shields and batons. Instead of defending their own people, the South Korean government is taking running orders from the U.S. military. Shame! I saw the hundreds of riot cops and dozens of empty police buses waiting to be loaded with arrested civilians in Soseongri. I remember putting a cold compress on the back of a grandmother's neck after she passed out from heat stroke while blocking U.S. military vehicles. Young students who cried with guilt and shame, deeply bowing an apology to the village elders for not doing enough to stop the U.S. military's destruction. Any government that does the bidding of its colonizer isn't a democracy. Former South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol was an exemplary U.S. lapdog, literally singing and dancing for Biden until his failed martial law coup attempt. Yoon was the latest puppet that the U.S. propped up. And for the 4th time in Korean history, the Korean people toppled them. If we want to dismantle U.S. fascism, we must recognize that our liberation here is tied to the liberation of people everywhere. The U.S. will prop up fascists all around the world to secure and extend its imperialist grip. They will beat up grandmothers in South Korea until they need back surgery and can no longer tend their ancestral farmlands. They will wipe out generations of families in Palestine. And they'll brutalize the protesters who refuse to watch their tax dollars fund it. The courage of the masses from Korea to Palestine is proof that U.S. imperialism isn't invincible. The people have won a ceasefire in Palestine, but Koreans are still living under a 72-year-old ceasefire and ongoing military occupation. Now we have to turn every ceasefire into a direct mandate for true sovereignty and end to occupation. Our struggle isn't just against one political party or administration, it's against the entire structure of oppression they uphold. We must stay in the streets. We must keep organizing and fight like hell until we get the U.S. out of Korea, out of Palestine, out of Haiti, and out of everywhere. No boots on the ground, no bombs in the air. U.S. out of everywhere.
are now honored to welcome former presidential candidate for the Green Party, Dr. Jill Stein.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is what democracy looks like, and this is what revolutionary change looks like. We are here to celebrate that, to celebrate the world that we deserve and to demand the world we deserve. We are here to inaugurate a new era of people power and to reject the propaganda of powerlessness, to reject the propaganda that they are winning. The oligarchy and empire are not winning. In fact, they are falling and we are rising. And they are failing. They are failing in every dimension of our lives. They are rapidly making this planet uninhabitable and unlivable. So we have no choice except to stand up and to keep fighting for an America and a world that works for all of us, and to know that world is within our reach. In many ways, it is closer than it has ever been, because the empire is teetering at the brink. The Israeli apartheid state is collapsing. Its military is exhausted. It would not survive for one moment without the blood, sweat, and tears from the American people and people around the world who are supporting that apartheid state. But the resistance is rising and the resistance is strong. Israel's economy is in an absolute shambles. Hundreds of thousands of people are leaving, and the boycott is going strong. That boycott is going strong. It is now supported by many people, not only across the world, but even in Europe. And that includes Portugal, who has islands all around the world that will no longer permit the transit of weapons to Israel. And many European countries are in that same place. I want to give a shout out also to the students who are leading this movement, a big movement to Students for Justice in Palestine, a big shout out and celebration, of course, to the people of Gaza and the resistance in Gaza that is working to free all of us. So we are inaugurating today a new era of freedom for Palestine. If Palestine is free, we will be free. We have much to do to keep that up. I want to leave you with two quick things. One is the words of Frederick Douglass. Power concedes nothing without a demand. We are that demand. As Alice Walker said, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. We've got it. Let's use it. We will be victorious. Free Palestine. Free the USA.
Now, free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Money for jobs and education! Not for war and occupation! Money for jobs and education! Not for war and occupation! We now are honored to welcome to the stage our dear comrades from the Democratic Socialists of America who have endorsed this movement on a nationwide basis. We now welcome Sammy.
Let me hear you say Free Palestine. Hello, comrades. Thank you for being here in the freezing cold. I'm here with the Democratic Socialists of America's Anti-War Working Group and the International Committee, and I'm really proud to be among you. Sometimes it feels like history comes out of nowhere. Our lives can feel simple until a major crisis happens, and then we get activated by outrage, by solidarity, by love. When an armed agent of the state killed the Shaheed George Floyd, we all poured out into the streets and shut this city down in his name, in Breonna Taylor's name, in Eric Garner's name, in Freddie Gray's name. Too many. When the Zionist genocide against the Palestinian people reached new, horrifying heights after the jailbreak known as Al-Aqsa flood, we again joined together and said in the hundreds of thousands with our whole hearts that Palestine will be free from the river to the sea. And now we find ourselves again, the working class masses, retracing our steps along the same streets, the same outrage, fighting the same enemy. Because we know that the same forces that are building the Cop City in Queens are the same forces that are locking up our friends and family in cages, and the same forces that dropped bombs in Gaza. These are different faces of the same U.S. empire. And as we confront the new fascist face of this empire, we know that history does not come from nowhere. We are not going to just react. We are not going to be taken by surprise. We will be taking our positions. Through every wave of struggle, we have become stronger. We have become smarter. We know how to take care of each other now. We know how to stand up for one another. We know how to take care of each other when we get hit by pepper spray. We know how to do mutual aid when we need to get fed. We know how to stare down the police bravely. We know that sometimes you have to put your phone in the freezer. We know that we need a massive coalition, like the one we see in front of us today, to break the back of capitalism and build the world that we want. We know how to fight now because we are all fighters now. Okay. So I'm gonna end here. I'm from Yemen, by the way. And if there's anything that Yemen and Palestine have taught us, it's that courage is possible, solidarity is possible, victory is possible, but we must fight for it. It will not come in any other way. Thank you very much.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine! We are honored to welcome our next speaker, former presidential candidate and leader in the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Please help me welcome Claudia de la Cruz. Who's got the power? What kind of power? I said, who's got the power? What kind of power? What kind of power? And we best believe that. We are here in the counter-inauguration of the 47th President of the United States. We are here in honor of Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King. We stand in his legacy when he told us that today is tomorrow. That there is an urgency in this country to make revolution. That there is an urgency in this country to end the rule of billionaires. That there is an urgency for the revolution of values in this nation. We are here to say that there is nothing peaceful from the transfer of power between billionaires to oppress working class people. We are here to proclaim that this day, the first day, is the years of resistance for the people that are determined to win. It is ludicrous to see how Democrats are bending the knee. It is ludicrous to see how the tech companies and the corporations are bending the knee. But we will not bend our knees. Our loyalty is for the total liberation of our people, from Puerto Rico to Palestine to Congo to the South Bronx to North Carolina. Our loyalty is to the total liberation of our people in every hood. We choose our people over Wall Street. We choose our people's right to access health care, housing, and education. We choose our people over and over again. And we say we will not bend our knees to any billionaire or a capitalist warmonger that takes office. We stand here today on the legacy of the Martin Luther King that denounced capitalism, white supremacy, militarism. And we know that it is those three evils that have accelerated the climate catastrophe that our people are experiencing. And we refuse to fall in line. We will not bend the knee. We will fight back. It is in our legacy to defend and protect ourselves and each other. Trump has announced a vicious attack upon immigrant communities. And let us not be fooled. It is a pattern of scapegoating. It is a pattern of telling us that somehow the immigrant communities are the ones that have the power to leave us without jobs. That somehow it is the immigrant communities that have the power to get us out of our homes. But we know it is the billionaire rule that has the power to make decisions that attack working class people in every neighborhood across this country. And so today we proclaim that we are here to defend and protect those who are ours. And the immigrant community is our community. Who's got the power? What kind of power? I said, who's got the power? What kind of power? Our next speaker is from Andalon, a leading movement of day laborers and immigrant workers across the country. Please help me welcome Jorge.
Hello, everyone. I want everyone to put your fist up, your left fist up, and we want to say, your left one, and we're going to say, El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. El pueblo unido. El pueblo unido. Today, we are here from the bottom up when Washington, D.C. is doing their own thing from the top to bottom. Today, the community is standing together to send a message to President Donald Trump. We are not going to stay away from our communities. We will defend our communities, and we're going to say, fuck ICE, abolish ICE, and we will not be scared. Because we don't have papers and we don't have fears. No papers. No papers. No papers. Today is a decision, is a decision of one in each of you to make in which side of the history you want to be. You want to be in the history of white supremacists, of exclusion, of imperialism, of capitalism, or you want to be in the side of the people, of the community, and for social justice? Which side do you want to be? Today, day laborers has been the first responders in Los Angeles when fires are going on. And this is an example when the government doesn't have the support, when the government doesn't show up. Who show up? We show up. The community shows up. And we have something that I want to share. Immigrants communities are under attack since today. And we need to stand up. We need to say, we need to start looking for our closest organization and ask, what is your strategy? I want to be part of it. I want to defend. Popular committees are organizing across the state and across the country, saying, we will not go back. We will stay here. We will fight, and we will keep fighting. Power to the people. Power to the people. No one is illegal. Power to the people. Power to the people. Power to the people. Thank you so much.
We now want to welcome a longtime activist and leader in our movement for Black liberation and for the liberation of our people overall. From Blackmon Build, we welcome Phil Agnew.
All power to the people. All power to the people. Love to the people. Love to the people. Peace to the people. Peace to the people. Right here. Right now. Right now. Right now. Oh, the American political project desires and demands. It needs and it feeds on amnesia. It requires that we forget. Every single day, the American empire requires for us to forget the millions of people that we lost in the pandemic. It says, keep on moving. Act like nothing happened. The millions of our brothers and sisters behind bars, just keep on moving. Act like it's not happening. The millions of people who have been displaced across the world, the genocide in Sudan, the genocide in Palestine, just keep on moving. So we're here today to say that we will remember, that we do not so easily forget. We're here to tell them that we do remember, that amnesia will not set in on us. Because when you allow yourself to forget, you will relinquish your humanity, your soul, and we will not allow them to take it. We say on this day that we'll remember not the sanitized Dr. King, not the calm Dr. King, not the kumbaya Dr. King, not the Disney movie Dr. King, but the radical Dr. King. The radical Dr. King that spoke against the war in Vietnam. The radical king that was murdered by this country and then celebrated. We say we'll remember that Dr. King. There's a song that's out right now by a brother named Kendrick Lamar. And in the song he says, I deserve it all. And I want y'all to repeat after me, we deserve it all. Tell your neighbor, we deserve it all. A free Palestine, we deserve it all. Healthcare for all, we deserve it all. A free Palestine, we deserve it all. An end to our people behind the gulags. We deserve it all. Now, there's a quote by a brother named George Jackson. I'm going to leave you all with this. Some of y'all heard of Brother George Jackson, the dragon. He says, settle your quarrels. Come together. Understand the reality of our situation. Understand that fascism is already here. That people are already dying who could be saved. That generations will live poor, butchered, half lives if you fail to act. Do what must be done. Discover your humanity and your love and revolution. Power to the people. Love to the people. Peace to the people.
Are y'all ready to march? We're getting close. We now want to welcome the president of a local of the United Auto Workers, Local 2710, President Grant Minor.
So, we've all been through a Trump presidency before, so I'm sure I don't have to tell you what that means for working class Americans. As you've heard today, Trump and his gang of billionaires have one goal that unites all their policies: to make them rich while we grow poorer and poorer. Shame. Because of that, it makes sense that his biggest target, one of his biggest targets, are labor unions. A union job is one of the last places that working class Americans can go to find work that pays them enough to afford stuff like food, housing, and medical care. Let's hear it for unions. But it also means that they're giving them, unions and the workers who have fought for them, give workers what the government and what the bosses will never give them: dignity for a day's work. Now, there's no reason why somebody who works full-time in the richest nation in the world should have to struggle just to survive. But every year, making ends meet gets harder and harder, and Trump and the billionaires want to squeeze us for everything we've got. Shame. And now that he's in office, they won't just do it by union busting in our workplaces, they're going to do it in the halls of government too. You know, Trump once said to Elon Musk, "Oh, you know, if workers are striking, you should just fire them." Boo. Now, of course, that's illegal. But what he wants to do is he wants to stack the National Labor Relations Board, the federal agency which administers labor law, with conservative judges who will overturn key legal decisions. So what this means for workers is that, for example, your boss could trap you in a meeting that tells you how evil unions are. You shouldn't pay your dues. You shouldn't unionize. They could make it harder to unionize. And let me just ask you a question. Who here has been in the streets for Palestine this past year? Now, what they would like to do is to make it illegal for your boss to fire you for doing anything that could hurt the company's image. So you better believe that if you wear a union pin with the Palestine flag on it, like I have for the past year, they want to fire you. Now, I'll let you in on a secret. The protections that we have from the government are nice, but they're not how any worker has gotten what we need to survive. We've done that by worker power. We're the ones who run society. We build the roads. We deliver the packages. We teach the kids. And if we make society run, we can shut it down. Now, we can only do that if we're organized. So I'll ask you a question. Who here is in a union? All right, that's great, but we got to get those numbers up. So we're at the We Fight Back rally. I want everybody who didn't just cheer, don't just go to your workplace and say, Trump's bad, what can you do? I want you to go to your workplace and start a union. And if you're in a union, get involved. Make a union that fights for the working class. Because together, we're going to show Trump that the working class will not go down without a fight. Thank you very much. When I say worker, you say power. Worker, 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 worker. Thank you, everybody.
When immigrant rights are under attack, what do we do? What do we do? I'm incredibly honored to welcome our last speaker, popular educator and education director at the People's Forum, and friend and comrade to many of us. Please help me welcome Leanne.
New York City, make some noise! There are thousands of us here today in the cold, but the cold is nothing to keep us from the streets and from the obligation that all of us feel here today to spread our message. So New York City, we are going to send our message loud and clear. We're going to join the thousands and the millions that are now in 80 cities organizing and marching alongside us. Look around at your neighbors. If you don't know each other, introduce each other, because today is more than a protest. Today is when we get organized. The past year, we have seen the world transformed by the movement in solidarity with the Palestinian people. In the past year, we have seen public opinion do a complete reversal. And we have seen the truth of the statement that Gaza will free us all. Gaza has freed us all. As we watch with joy the prisoners returning home, the Palestinians, the thousands of Palestinians held illegally in Zionist prisons returning home. We know that the freedom that Gaza has shown us is even more than this. The freedom that Gaza has shown us, it has taken off the mask of those war criminals, whether they are Republican or whether they are Democrat, who sit in the White House and pretend to rule the world. Trump today is taking office in a world radically transformed than last time he stepped foot in the White House. And so our task today is not simply to protest. Our task today is to send a message to our people, our communities, the White House, and the rest of the world that the people of the United States are organized and are ready. There will be no rollback of civil rights without organized struggle against it. There will be no mass deportations without organized defense. There will be no increase in the war machine, no expansion of imperialist war without the growth of the anti-war movement. And the time is ticking for the billionaire agenda. We have our own proposals. We know what we want to see, and we are getting organized to make it happen. So today we are going to march, and we are going to invite all of New York City to join us. And our next task is very clear. Come to the organizing meeting at the People's Forum right after the march, as soon as it's over, to pick up the task, get moving, get working, and keep struggling and organizing for what's yet to come. We're going to keep on building. We are the ones with the power, whether we are workers, whether we are activists, whether we are families. It's time for us to rise up and make sure that our demands are not just heard, but they are realized. So New York City, are you ready to march? New York City, are you ready to march? Behind me here, through the arch, you can go around on the stage, we have banners lined up. We're going to fill in behind those banners, and we are going to march in unity and an organization, and we are going to send our message to the world. So everyone with me, when immigrant rights are under attack, what do? When immigrant rights are under attack, what do? When Palestine is under attack, what do?
Number one terrorist! U.S. imperialists! One solution! Revolution! One solution! Revolution! One solution! One solution! One solution! There is only one solution!
And as New York prepares to march, we will be checking back in with the New York demonstration a little later on. But now we're going to see some images from different demonstrations around the country, of course, with protests in over 80 cities in resistance to the Trump inauguration. And I want to begin with a clip from Manchester, New Hampshire, showing their reaction to the news of the clemency that was granted to political prisoner Leonard Peltier.
All right, team. We got some breaking news going on right now. I don't know if you guys are all familiar with political prisoner Leonard Peltier is falsely accused of murdering, I believe, a police officer, and he has been just awarded clemency after 3 months. That is a result of decades of organizing, of people just like you, just like us, coming together, getting together in the streets, letting power know that we want justice and we want them all freed. So give it up for ourselves, give it up for the community, and give it up for Leonard himself. Fantastic.
And again, that was a reaction in Manchester, New Hampshire, from their inauguration protest, reacting to the news of clemency for political prisoner Leonard Peltier. Also going to be seeing a reaction video from Indianapolis, also to Leonard's clemency.
I just wanted to let everybody know that while we've been here, I just got notification that Biden has officially commuted the sentence of Leonard Peltier. It's to home confinement, so I'm not going to give him too much credit. But this is extremely important for all indigenous rights activists. For anyone who doesn't know, Leonard Peltier has been falsely imprisoned and falsely convicted of a crime he did not commit for allegedly killing 2 FBI agents during the AIM occupation, when AIM took over and was protecting indigenous lands in South Dakota. And so this is monumental. I'm not going to give all the credit to the United States government or to Biden. I'm actually going to give the credit to everybody who's been on the ground fighting for his clemency for decades. But just to know that in such a dark day, we have a little bit of a glimmer of hope. So shout out to Leonard Peltier and his family and all indigenous activists across this country.
All right, we're turning this.
Absolutely. Again, images from Indianapolis of people reacting to the news of political prisoner Leonard Peltier being granted clemency after decades of unjust imprisonment. And now we're going to return to the protest and march that's happening in New York City that's already in progress. Absolutely, and that was the New York City demonstration on today, of course, the day of the presidential inauguration of Donald Trump, who's preparing to enter the White House for a second time. And as Trump thinks that he's inaugurating, an administration of a far-right attack and all-out assault on poor, working, and oppressed people here in this country, and I would argue around the world, the masses of people in the United States have elected to inaugurate a resistance against him and his reactionary pro-capitalist program. And what we're seeing in these different protests in New York City is just one demonstration that's happening in over 80 cities across this country of people doing the same thing, and we're seeing some images there. Now, later on at 2 p.m. Pacific time and 5 p.m. Eastern time, we will be streaming from LA. Breakthrough's Kay Pritzker will be there leading that coverage. And we're actually going to, in a moment, go to a clip from Kay about the criminality of insurance companies in Los Angeles in the aftermath of the wildfires. It's actually pretty galling, I would say, what these insurance companies are doing, really leaving people out in the cold in a moment of great devastation, people losing really everything that they know, losing basically everything that they own, and these insurance companies that they pay money to basically cutting them off and denying them, all for the sake of profit. So here we have yet another example of capitalism and of these corporate structures and these institutions exploiting people in their time of greatest need. And I believe we're going to go to that right now.
I'm standing here in the epicenter of the Palisades fire. This is one of many fires that took place in Los Angeles, and you probably heard about it on TV. Maybe you saw interviews of Hollywood celebrities, actors, talking about how they lost their homes or they had friends who lost homes in this fire. Now, this is one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Los Angeles. A lot of Hollywood actors, financiers, other wealthy people live in this area. And this is undoubtedly one of the reasons the Palisades have gotten a lot of attention in the media, a lot of coverage. And in that coverage, you've probably heard pundits referring to this as a natural disaster. But this framing really hides the fact that so many aspects of this crisis are man-made. One of those aspects being the conduct of the real estate industry in the lead up to these fires. In the last few years, the real estate industry has been lobbying against legislation in Los Angeles that would prevent the industry from building more housing in high fire risk areas like the Palisades. And because of their efforts lobbying against these bills, they were able to build a huge density of houses, which basically became a tinderbox when the Palisades fire began. And this was one of the primary reasons that the Palisades fire burned so strong and so long, and why the fire was able to spread to neighboring areas.
To understand the core of the issue here, first we have to understand what makes the Palisades such a high-risk area. The Palisades are a community built near the Pacific coast, on the outskirts of the city. Unlike urban centers, as you can see here, homes in the Palisades are built right in the middle of forests and vegetation that become a tinderbox, especially during dry seasons like the one California just experienced this winter. These areas that border undeveloped wildlands are called the wildland-urban interface, and are the areas where fires usually start. Some kind of spark, whether it be a loose cigarette butt or downed power lines, causes vegetation to catch on fire, which then quickly spreads to the homes surrounding it. In 2019, state authorities warned that rapid housing development in the wildland-urban interface was potentially putting millions of people in the direct path of wildfires, and called on the real estate industry to shift development to lower-risk urban areas. Now, in a logical and forward-thinking society, houses wouldn't be built in areas where they're extremely likely to burn down. But in a system where houses are built based on whichever location will make the housing developers the most money, it makes total sense to build houses wherever they make the most profit, regardless of whatever risks come with it down the line. That, according to the housing industry, would be someone else's problem.
You can just see the density of the housing in this neighborhood. I mean, this is one house, there's another house here and another house. I mean, it's just, block after block is just full of this high density housing. And, this is a very wealthy neighborhood. So we're talking about huge profit margins for the real estate industry here. It's plain to see why they wanted to continue building housing here.
Despite being a textbook case of a high-risk fire area, housing profiteers increased housing construction in the Palisades because of how profitable it was. The Palisades offer views of the Pacific Ocean that attract some of the most high-wealth individuals in the country looking to build expensive waterfront mansions. An investigation published by reporter Katya Schwenk for The Lever shows that real estate developers not only ignored warnings from the state, but spent millions of dollars lobbying against laws that would have prevented them from building in these high-risk areas. In 2021, State Senator Henry Stern put forward a bill that would have blocked real estate developments in high-risk fire areas. The bill faced an onslaught of real estate industry lobbyists and ended up dying in committee a year later. Another state senator put forward a bill that didn't even stop housing development, it just made housing developers use fireproof materials in their construction. But this was still too restrictive for housing profiteers who insisted on being able to use cheaper, flammable building materials to protect their profit margins. Overall, the California real estate lobby spends millions of dollars every year donating money to politicians and churning out ads promoting their interests. These lobbying efforts allowed the real estate industry to get away with building developments like the Palisades Highlands, one of the newest developments in the high-risk Pacific Coast area. It was ultimately fires in this development that helped the Palisades fire spread to lower-risk neighborhoods. The legacy of the Palisades fire shouldn't be that a bunch of actors and film directors lost their mansions and that we should feel sorry for them because they were in our favorite movie. The legacy is the same legacy housing profiteers have left in every city in America. The legacy of their greed and how it uproots our lives on a daily basis. As it stands now, the real estate industry won't be held legally accountable for lobbying against these fire safety measures that could have saved thousands of homes. And with discussion of rebuilding efforts already underway, housing profiteers are undoubtedly already laying out their plans to maximize profits off of the recovery. Not even 2 weeks after these fires, there are already reports that landlords in Los Angeles are raising rents as much as 124% in the hopes of exploiting the newly homeless in their hour of deepest needs. California Governor Gavin Newsom said in an interview that he's already assembled a team to implement a Marshall Plan to create an LA 2.0. There's no doubt that there needs to be an LA 2.0, but the question will be, who will an LA 2.0 serve? Will it continue to be a city run by housing profiteers, or will the fires serve as the final straw in a long list of crimes committed by this parasitic industry so that Los Angeles is rebuilt in a way that puts the needs of people and the planet first?
Today, we're visiting the house of Stuart and Linda Resnick, the two billionaires that have built an empire off of pistachios, pomegranate juice, and other snack products. And the reason we're here is because they've obviously been they've been in the news lately because they are accused of being water hoarders. The Resnicks, they consume more water, these two people, than all of Los Angeles combined. So we came here to 9491 Sunset Boulevard in Beverly Hills to get the real answers. We want to talk to them. We want to ask them if the accusations are true, because they actually came out recently and said this is all a conspiracy theory, that if you believe that they are water hoarders, that you're actually a conspiracy theorist. So we came to their mansion here in the 90210 to get some answers. Let's go. I mean, coming up to this gate, you just see all the cameras. There's a camera there, a camera there, a camera there. But let's see if we can. All right.
Hey, do me a favor, guys. Please step off the driveway.
Hey, we're with Breakthrough News. We were just interested in talking to Stuart about these accusations that he's hoarding water.
That's not going to happen, boss. Please step off the driveway. You're going to be on the sidewalk, okay?
Is he home?
Doesn't matter, boss. Can I have you please step off the driveway?
All right. So, this is the delivery entrance. I don't know if there's water coming here or what. Oh, okay, so here we go. So they've got the security coming out. Hey, guys.
Hey, boss. I've asked you nicely. Please step on the concrete.
So they've got a giant intercom there hidden in this bush. Yeah, no, we're on the sidewalk. Yeah, we just wanted to clear up some of this confusion around whether or not he's consuming more water than all of Los Angeles combined. Yeah, we just want to clarify some confusion about... Yeah, no problem, thanks. We're just trying to help. We're just trying to help them clarify this water issue. Do you guys have any water?
Up until a few weeks ago, Stuart and Linda Resnick were, for the most part, unknown figures to most of the American public. In the farming world, they're known as America's biggest farmers, or America's wealthiest farmers. Of course, the Resnicks don't actually farm, they hire people for that. What the Resnicks actually do is own things, specifically this company, the Wonderful Company, LLC. The Wonderful Company, LLC is a holding company that owns several brands including Fiji Water, juice company Palm Wonderful, Wonderful Halos, and most famously, their pistachio and almond brand, Wonderful Pistachios and Almonds. The Resnicks have amassed a fortune of $12 billion selling these snack products which they say nearly half of all Americans consume every year. The Wonderful Company is the largest pistachio grower in the world and grows 15 to 20% of the entire U.S. pistachio crop. Pistachio farming consumes an unbelievable amount of water, and in the wake of the recent fires in Los Angeles, the Resnicks' aggressive water consumption has come under widespread public scrutiny.
So I'm standing here in one of the infamous Wonderful Company pistachio groves. As you can see, this grove just goes, this orchard just goes all the way down as far as the eye can see. Any direction you look, you just see nothing but pistachio trees. And you can see the nature of the problem here. Each of these trees consumes up to 50 gallons of water a day in its peak season. So to put that in perspective, we're all familiar with these half-liter bottles of water. Well, these trees consume about 379 of these every single day at peak times. And, you know, this is just one tree we're talking about. You take that and you multiply by however many trees are in this orchard here, which this is not at all the only orchard. You start to see why this has become such a controversial issue.
The amount of backlash has been so incredible that the Wonderful Company had to publish a statement denouncing the accusations as viral conspiracy theories, topped off with the insistence that people only read what verified news outlets like Fortune magazine and Rolling Stone have said about the issue. There is a kernel of truth to what the Wonderful Company is saying. There have been viral posts claiming that the Resnicks own 60 or 70% of the state's water, which is probably referring to the fact that the Resnicks own a 57% stake in the Kern Water Bank, an important water resource, but just one of many such water banks in the state. It's also not true that the fires spread because Los Angeles didn't have enough water to fight the fires. It was really the deficient water infrastructure that was behind the empty fire hydrants in certain areas. The Wonderful Company and the corporate media have jumped on these inaccuracies to label any criticism of the Resnicks as conspiracy theories or anti-Semitic. The Fortune article literally quotes the Wonderful Company itself as proof that the company doesn't engage in water hoarding. But none of these debunking articles change the fact that the Resnicks and their company consume more water than all Los Angeles residents combined and approximately 3% of the entire consumption of the state when you count the water in their water reserves. But the issue could definitely use some reframing. The problem isn't the Resnicks. Rather, the Resnicks are a manifestation of the problem. What are the Resnicks after all? The Resnicks are a manifestation of a system where food is produced to generate the highest profit margin possible, not feed people. In a society where food was produced for the sake of feeding people and maximizing human well-being, you wouldn't allow people to amass massive private stocks of water so they can grow expensive snack foods that really are a luxury food that aren't necessary for any proper diet. That would be such a blatant misuse of water, it really doesn't need explanation, and yet that's precisely the situation we live under now. Profit and greed are the reason agribusinesses grow this incredibly water-intensive crop in places that wouldn't naturally sustain them, and ultimately why pistachio magnates like the Resnicks exist. In a study conducted by UCLA, researchers found that changing California's food crop to prioritize water use efficiency could lower California's agricultural water consumption by as much as 93%. But the researchers acknowledged that this was probably never going to happen because pistachios, almonds, and other water-intensive luxury crops are more profitable to grow. California's agriculture sector, which accounts for 80% of the state's water consumption, chooses to grow these water-intensive crops that are completely unnecessary to the human diet solely because they make more money that way. That's why California's most successful farmers owe a lot of their success to hoarding water. At the most basic level, water is one of the few things that every human being needs and will die without, which is what makes the Resnick story so offensive to virtually everyone that learns about it. But their business tactics are clearly just an expression of a system that treats water as a commodity that can be bought and sold for profit, even hoarded, while billions of people worldwide face droughts. It's the same system that treats houses as a commodity to be bought and sold for profit, or medicine, while tens of millions of people are housing insecure, facing deteriorating health, and crushing medical debt. The story of the Resnicks is a shocking one, but if it makes you angry to see so much individual wealth alongside so much suffering, or to see the necessities of life treated as privileges and possessions instead of as rights, what you're really angry at is capitalism itself.
And again, that was Breakthrough's Kay Pritzker breaking down how these predatory insurance companies have completely abandoned people in the aftermath of the devastation of the LA fires. And we're happy now to be joined by Kay Pritzker, who is in Los Angeles as their demonstration prepares to kick off a little later on. Kay, how you doing? Thanks for joining us. Kay, can you hear us?
Doing great. Great to be here in Los Angeles. It's, just been a really harrowing week. Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. My bad. Didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Can you hear me, Sean? Okay, so yeah, it's been really harrowing to see everything that's happening here. But yes, we'll be joining the demonstration, one of the 80 that are taking place across the country later today at 2 p.m. But good to be here with you. Great show so far. I've been watching from the sidelines.
For sure, for sure. And Kay, I mean, given what you've laid out in your video, I mean, not just about the insurance companies, but the fact that in a time such as this, where there are wildfires and in a part of the country dealing with drought, that we literally have rich people hoarding water. I mean, I just feel like there's so many different threads that are interwoven through this issue. Given everything that LA has been facing recently, why do you think it's relevant, or why do you think it's necessary that there be a demonstration today as Donald Trump is sworn in once again as President of the United States?
Yeah, I think the two issues are really intertwined. I mean, you guys have been talking about the billionaire agenda, Trump's billionaire agenda. And of course, his cabinet is the wealthiest in memory, probably the wealthiest cabinet of all time. I mean, it is basically like a mask off of the class character of the state and of the government and of this system to just literally be run, under a government of billionaires. But at the same time, I think you see like the exact same thing happening here with the response to the fires in California. And, I think it's so funny. Trump and all these Republicans have been attacking, Democratic politicians, saying that they're incompetent, this and the other. They've been blaming them for, Karen Bass was in Ghana, or, they're coming up with all these ridiculous issues. But the real problem is the greed. I mean, and that's what no one wants to talk about. That's what neither party will talk about. And, California has this reputation as being such like a liberal left wing, California, whatever. But really, it's the opposite. Really, this disaster was caused entirely by the greed of the insurance company, of the state of California, of the agribusinesses that are all across the state of California. You just start with this big. People have been talking about the insurance industry, which pulled insurance for so many different homeowners for millions of homeowners across California because they felt it would be too risky to cover them. And it's like, well, what is the point of insurance besides, being there in your moments of need? But that is when these predatory insurance companies felt the most inclined to actually pull away from their customers. And, it's funny because Gavin Newsom, he's been putting out all of these updates every single day about, what he's doing to respond. And it reminds me a lot, his response reminds me a lot of what Trump is doing, which is pointing the finger at every single thing besides the actual problem. Trump talks about how immigrants are somehow making workers poorer or whatever, they're the reason you don't have a job, when it's actually the billionaires. Gavin Newsom, he declared a state of emergency, and he says, okay, from now on, insurance companies aren't allowed to cancel people's service. And it's like, well, isn't it already too late for that? Like, the moment for that has already passed. And one of the central demands of the people today at the demonstration against Trump will be for full compensation. And, that'll be a theme, obviously, in the fight against the Trump administration as a whole, is to hold these corporate criminals accountable. And then, of course, the other issues of where was this this funding that was cut for the fire department, the $17 million. We heard the LA fire chief say that this was crucial. This was really detrimental to her fire department in combating these fires. And, again, part and parcel with the Trump administration's larger agenda of gutting public services. I mean, the way they're selling this whole agenda to the American people is by saying, oh, well, if we cut the Department of Education, if we abolish the IRS, somehow that money is going to end up back in our pockets. But really what we've seen in California is the perfect example. No, it's actually going to deteriorate public services that we need, and it will lead to much greater catastrophes like the one we've seen in California today and in the last 2 weeks.
Absolutely. And you make a couple of crucial points, Kay, just sort of about the interconnectedness of these different issues, and also the way that the people affected and impacted by these wildfires were just failed on every single level, which is why we're seeing the kinds of impacts that we're seeing. And for me, Kay, it's hard to look at the wildfire crisis in LA and not think about other, what we'll call natural disasters in a sense here in the country. I mean, I think some of us would argue that they're actually driven, by capitalist exploitation and things like this. But it's hard not to also look at, other extreme weather events that we've been seeing happening lately, such as a Hurricane Helene, which really waylaid the Carolinas. And similar to Helene, what we've seen in the LA wildfires is a complete lack of critical response from the government, but a resounding and serious organized response from the communities and from the people themselves that are impacted by it. We are seeing people organize to meet the urgent needs of their communities that have basically completely fallen by the wayside in terms of the government of the so-called greatest country on earth, talking about the United States. They tell us that America is the greatest. They tell us that capitalism is the greatest system. And yet, in moments of crisis, in moments of these life and death issues, this so-called greatest system and the so-called greatest country is, I think, conspicuously absent. And, excuse me, actually, the last thing you said in your video, Kay, you sort of place the blame for the wildfires and its impacts squarely on the shoulders of capitalism. And I was hoping you could sort of break down why you think that is and how you think that factors into this resistance that we see to Trump and his billionaire agenda.
Yeah, Sean. So, to start, I'll say there was something that Phil Agnew said from the New York protest that really just sat with me, that really, touched me in my core, which was that the system really works off of amnesia, and it works off of making people forget what happened to you yesterday and just moving on to the next thing and the next thing. I actually spoke to one of the survivors of Hurricane Helene who was, in touch, who was having a conversation with a man named Robert who had lost his home in Altadena, and she was warning Robert,
be prepared for the government to fail you, to kick you to the curb, to completely abandon the promises they made to you yesterday, which is exactly what happened to the survivors of Hurricane Helene. This woman we were talking to, MJ, she was describing how she was kicked out of her hotel just a month after the worst floods in 150 years in North Carolina. The government says, yeah, we can't afford to pay you to stay in a hotel for disaster we failed to prepare for. Meanwhile, there was that clip of Lindsey Graham being asked on Fox News about what we should do about the hurricane, and he says we should send more money to Israel. These are things like these daily humiliations and insults from the ruling class that, we've elected, and they come to us for our votes. We put them in power, and then they come and spit on us. I mean, you see the same thing happening here in Los Angeles. You had Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, thanking Disney, Netflix, Androff, basically her donors. She was thanking corporations when the city government really did nothing. I mean, it was absolutely the efforts of the people that really saved or did anything for this city, and it really makes you think. I mean, they say, oh well, you would never be anything without your leaders, without these titans of industry to lead you, because working people aren't smart enough or organized to run society. But that we saw the complete opposite here in Los Angeles. But Sean, to your point about capitalism, I mean, this whole crisis really was something that needed to be prevented through planning. I mean, this was really a failure of planning more than anything. And, the framing you're talking about, natural disasters, this is a common thing you hear in the media. Oh, it's, this is a natural disaster. It's something we could have never foreseen. In that package about the real estate industry, I mean, this is something the state was warning about for years, literally for 5 years. And the real estate industry was the one fighting tooth and nail against regulations that would have prevented construction in these high fire risk areas, and also forced the real estate industry to build with fireproof materials, which, in any system, in any logical system, you wouldn't build homes in the way of wildfires or in a area that's very likely to burn down. But the reason it's so important, Sean, to talk about capitalism is because these real estate magnates, these real estate, capitalists, they were being driven by the profit motive, their motive or incentive to make money off of housing. And in that type of system, in a capitalist system, it makes complete sense, actually. It makes complete sense to fight against basic public health measures because, those impose a cost on business. And it's the same thing with, the water issue. I mean, it's not like the Resnicks alone could have stopped these fires. It's actually a bigger systemic issue of why is agribusiness allowed to hold the water supply of an entire state hostage when it's facing a drought? And this is something we saw in the news, that California was facing the driest winter season in a very, very long time. Maybe some of this water, could be diverted from pistachios and other luxury goods to California's response. And one more thing I want to add is, there's also the aftermath, which you could really call like a second disaster. The disaster hits, but really the crisis gets exacerbated every single time by the state, by the capitalist state's response. And we're seeing that now in Los Angeles. In that piece I did about the real estate industry, I asked the question, what will an LA 2.0 look like? What will the state's response look like? This is crucial. And Gavin Newsom answered that question the other day by appointing Steve Soberoff, a real estate developer himself, to basically oversee the redevelopment of the city. And we all know what that means if we remember, for example, Katrina. I mean, the watery graves of people in New Orleans were built on top of by real estate developers. They built luxury apartments and basically built homes on top of people's graves that the people living there couldn't even afford. That is what the real estate industry is looking to do here. You have them, they're sort of swarming like vultures on top of the destruction that these fires have left behind.
Absolutely. And once again, that is Kay Pritzker on the ground, who will be joining us during a live stream at 2 p.m. Pacific time, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the Los Angeles demonstration. So thanks again so much, Kay, for joining us. And we will now take another look at the New York demonstration already in progress.
Gaza!
Scenes from the anti-inauguration protest here in New York City in resistance to the incoming Donald Trump administration and his far-right pro-capitalist agenda. And speaking of Trump, we're actually going to go to a CNN clip of Donald Trump talking about the fate of the people he calls the January 6th hostages.
And I was going to talk about the J6 hostages, but you'll be happy because, you know, it's action, not words that count. And you're going to see a lot of action on the J6 hostages. See a lot of action. And I was going to talk about the things that Joe did today with the pardons of people that were very, very guilty of very bad crimes, like the Unselect Committee of Political Thugs, where they literally, I mean, what they did is they destroyed and deleted all of the information, all of the hearings, practically not a thing left. They deleted all the information on Nancy Pelosi having turned down the offer of 10,000 soldiers. You wouldn't have needed 10,000, you could have had 500, and they would have stopped. Because we may have had 1 million people that day, the people that were there. You don't see any photographs, but we have a lot of great photos. But you don't see those photographs. They don't put them in. They show the people at the Capitol. But I was talking about that. I was going to talk about that. They said, please don't bring that up right now. You can bring it up tomorrow. I said, how about now in front of the very... I'll bring it up right now.
Again, that was Donald Trump. Excuse me, talking about the fate of the people he describes as the, quote, hostages of the January 6th trial, of course, following from the armed right-wing attack on the Capitol that happened at his order. So seems pretty likely that these people will be freed. And now we're going to have a look at Washington, D.C., where Brian Becker is speaking at the anti-inauguration protest there.
And brothers, Donald Trump decided to move the inaugural ceremony inside because he said it was too cold. That's not why. It's not real. It is cold, but it's not too cold. The real reason is Donald Trump is telling the world and telling the country that he has a mandate. And the fact of the matter is, there weren't going to be that many people on the inaugural parade route, and it gives a lie to the idea that Trump has a mandate.
Yo. And that was Brian Becker in Washington, D.C. at the inauguration protest there. And that's going to do it for today for our coverage of at least this part of the coverage of the inauguration protests happening across the country here on Breakthrough News. Later on, we will be seeing Kay Pritzker again during the L.A. demonstration. That will be happening at 2 p.m. Pacific time, 5 p.m. Eastern time. Be sure to like, subscribe, and become Breakthrough patrons so that we can keep the movement moving on and can keep bringing you this great coverage and analysis. And so that'll do it for today. For Breakthrough News, I'm Sean Blackmon, and we will see you next time. Peace.